Pastor, what is happening in our world? We look around and we see all kinds of things happening that are very negative and very anti-Christian, and we begin to wonder, can the church survive? Those are questions that I have heard from a number of people. They are in fact questions that I have raised for myself as I have reflected, particularly in the last, well, at least the last couple of years, starting with the COVID pandemic has certainly brought a lot of things to a head. And we begin to look at what's happening in our political world and our world of education and the school system, and we think about the immorality, and all of a sudden we are seeing and hearing about riots on the streets and great big cities who are virtually defunding their police force, and it's almost scary, and people ask those kinds of questions. And as I think about that situation that we find ourselves in, more and more teaching in the public school is not only sort of humanistic, it is very anti-Christian. It reminds me of the prophet Habakkuk. Habakkuk raised questions of a similar nature in his day. Let me remind you of a couple of things that he said in the early parts of the book of Habakkuk. He said, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for your help, and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise." You know, we are faced with the reality, probably the first time in the history of our nation, first time for many of you in your experience of the Christian life, that you are finding yourself in a world that clearly is not guided by Christian principles. We are living in a pagan world. How do we deal with that? How do we survive that? There's a struggle there. Now, Habakkuk was particularly dealing with the church in his day in the Old Testament. We are not only looking at the church, and much of that goes by the name of the church today is a far, far cry from being faithful to the scriptures. We're bothered by that. Beyond the church, we live in a world, as I've just briefly described, in which violence, in which the truth of God is being stamped upon by people, and it is becoming a very, very pagan world. How do we live in that? Habakkuk faced that, and he raised the questions. The things that concerned him were not unlike the struggle that we have today. So I see that as we look at, and it's my intention to take a careful look as we work our way through the book of Habakkuk, to see what we might learn and where we might find some comfort in the same situation that Habakkuk found himself in. And particularly, I want to point to the fact that Habakkuk cried out unto God. Now, I'm sure that you pray regularly for the church and for the leaders that God has given us, for our nation, for the culture that is around us. And we pray that things would change, that God would move men to open their hearts to the truth of God. Habakkuk did that, and Habakkuk was particularly troubled even that it seemed like God was not answering him. You will find in the Psalms, in a number of places, where often the psalmist says, "Lord, where are you? You're not hearing me." It's easy to fall into that very same similar situation. But here's the thing that I want to underscore at this point. What is happening to us is not anything new. We have become so used to being in a Christian culture, even though often there is sin in our culture. But now we've all of a sudden moved into the reality of the attack upon Christianity becoming real in our lives. And we're troubled by that, and we should be. And we should go to God in prayer. But remember that sin has always been in this world. Sin has always shown itself in many different ways. We need to be careful not to think that somehow all of a sudden the whole thing is falling apart. It is not. It may seem that way, and we may need to get on our knees and learn some lessons like the people did in Habakkuk's day. But the thing that Habakkuk found, and we're going to talk about these over the next few weeks, but the thing that Habakkuk found is that God knew exactly what was going on. God has his plan. We are not unique. We are not special. God is still in control.